Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Easy Conversations podcast, a podcast about having easy conversations. I'm your host, Furkan Dandia. In this week's episode, I welcome Kevin McNamara, who is the author of the book Satisfaction: How a Man Elevates His Skills and Qualities to Generate What He Wants. In this episode, Kevin and I discuss how men struggle in today's society to find themselves and how they can show up as their best selves. Kevin also shares the inspiration behind wanting to write this book and his own experiences. If at the end of the episode, if you could leave a 5-star review, I would truly appreciate it. Kevin, thanks again for taking the opportunity to sit down with me and have this conversation. I'm super grateful. But yeah, before we get started with the podcast episode, I kind of want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and touch on a little bit of how we connected based on your book. And, we'll kind of get into that conversation as we progress here.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Fair. This is a great opportunity to, like you say, talk about the book. The book's called Satisfaction, and we can get into what my message is with that. I'm looking to connect with people, mostly men, about personal growth. And that's how we found each other on Instagram. Because there's a lot of guys out there who I think are want to grow, feeling different things of how in different stages of life they want to find satisfaction, be the spouse that they want to be, off their wife, a fabulous husband. And sometimes there's good resources. I think a lot of times there aren't. And I'm really seeing that specifically on Instagram, there's a lot of guys who are thinking similar things, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone's got their way of doing it, and which is great. Some guys are getting together, doing retreats. Other guys are doing coaching, one-on-one, like Zoom calls. And so I think there's lots of different avenues for guys to be able to ask a few questions and understand what the next stage of life is asking of them, what their current role of life is asking of them. And that's where I focus on it's, the unknown, right? It's lots of different terms: spiritual life, devotional life, personal religion. That's where I try and put my perception, because I think, like I say, there's a lot of guys doing some great work. I want to come alongside them and provide some things that have worked for me, some ideas about direction for guys that looking to grow, looking to find their niche and some community, some belonging. So that's that was my journey on one part. And then another part is my daughters would come home from school, and normally in high school, and they would say, tell us, oh, how was your day? And tell us about the teachers, and tell us about walking down the hall by the football change room, how bad it smells. And this is all stories you want to hear. You want to know about their life, and you're so glad that they include all the details. And so occasionally, not every day, but occasionally they'd say, this girl went to the office and then the cops came in because she reported someone was beating her or raping her, like her boyfriend. And there'd be stories like that. Or another girl just had to move out of her house because her parents were, just had a disaster of a relationship. And the girl had to go live by herself. The government found an apartment, and basically at 16 years old on her own. And so you see it's nothing new where there's domestic violence. It goes both ways. We're understanding, but I'm listening to my daughters, and I'm saying, I don't want that as their future. What can I do about that? Right? Because I can say I can support them, which I do, but we're obviously missing something. And whether it's for a system where a woman can feel confident to report violence, or for a man not to be violent, or both. And that's where I wanted to be proactive. So that's the result is the book Satisfaction. It's called Satisfaction: how a man elevates his skills and qualities to generate what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And so from the title, yeah, generate what he wants. And I think that is something that really runs through the book. And like I say, other initiatives on Instagram that I see, and obviously elsewhere, is that what is the kind of man you want to be, and
Yeah.
to regain your manhood, because that's how you feel powerful, and powerful in the sense of accomplishing,
Mm-hmm.
of taking on struggles and stress, right? It's not the power of manipulation, obviously. And so
Mm-hmm.
so I combined my personal search with the information from my daughters, and I started a blog because I'd done writing before, but I really needed to up my game. So I started a
Mm-hmm.
blog called The Wild Coach, and yeah, it's out there. It's on WordPress. I'm still fairly active in it, and
Yeah.
what I would do is a lot of the subjects are in the book. I started them in the blog. It's called The Wild Coach because I love the connection we can have with nature.
Mm-hmm.
And technology is great, but sometimes we need to put down the phone
Yeah.
and get out there. And
Yeah.
we all know it. We all know it. And it's to then just find someone, hey, let's go for a bike ride. Let's go skiing. Let's go for a walk. Let's just get out there and read or whatever it is. Get some fresh air, take off your shoes and walk through even just the backyard, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that counts as nature,
Yeah.
right? And so that's when I was younger, I went to camp, and then it was canoeing. It was in Algonquin Park in Ontario, and massive. Algonquin Park is massive. It's awesome, and you can still see tons of animals. You still see a lot of moose, and they have the wolf howls where people go at night, and bears you really want to be careful with. But
Yeah.
it's thriving, and so I went there a couple of summers going to camp, and then I continued a couple of summers being one of the counselors,
Mm-hmm.
taking campers on canoe trips, and that to me had a huge impact. And so I've just kept that going. Later on, I finished university and was working, and I would I tried to do a monthly hike. There's the
Yeah.
Bruce Trail in Ontario. It goes from near Niagara Falls up to Tobermory. Beautiful, about 400-kilometer trail that goes. It's amazing because it goes across people's properties, and
Mm-hmm.
you have to cross streets and everything. And it's tons of waterfalls by Hamilton there. So really beautiful and
Mm-hmm.
really well kept up. The people who do the conservation, the volunteers on the Bruce Trail do awesome. And so I would take small groups, and we'd go for 2.5 hour hike or something like that. Nothing
Mm-hmm.
big, but again, the more people going for the same reason would really be rejuvenating. And
Mm-hmm.
so then that was going well. So I did a few canoe trips up in Temagami in Ontario, and again, absolutely beautiful. And taking people up, we'd go up in September just to avoid the crowds, avoid the bugs, and it was I did that for a couple of years as well, just a little thing on my own, but again, connecting people with nature. And
Yeah.
so that's why it's called The Wild Coach, the blog, because nature has a huge impact, ongoing healing for us in many ways, as we
Mm-hmm.
know, the body, but also just breathing in the air, and just touching the rocks and the trees. So I really want to encourage that in people's life, because then relating that to the book, hey, if a guy basically has some degree of satisfaction, I think he has more in him before he gets to the absolute limit of his patience, where he gets angry and yells or might hit someone. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's really why I I really want to encourage that in absolutely everyone to if it's once a week when they carve out their time. I mean, some guys, their man cave is in the garage, right? I
Yeah.
had a buddy. He had all his posters up there of the motorbikes and a few women in bikinis, and then he had his tools and everything, and he loved it.
Yeah.
He sat on his stool, and it's like he was completely happy. That was his man cave.
Yeah.
Mine is more mobile. I love being in nature, and so like the function of man cave, whatever that is, I think man cave, more rejuvenating, right? So
Mm-hmm.
life can get crazy. Marriage is a challenge. Children are nonstop,
Mm-hmm.
and money and parents getting older and whatever meaning in life. It's like it gets, if not a lot, too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, what's something a guy can do on his own? I mean, we don't just run to a doctor, for some kind of prescription. I mean, when we have to, we have to. But I think the man cave process is really useful, right? And that's this retreat to be able to recharge and just my buddy in his garage just puts around with his tools,
Mm-hmm.
make sure every tool is in the right spot, and just maybe he's some guys, and this one guy build birdhouses, but this other guy he would collect not just a lot of found objects, and he just refurbished them a bit, and so to him that brought him inside him, so that the next morning he could wake up, go to work, have to deal with the garbage or the challenge or the camaraderie, whatever it was. And he had, right, he recharged. He had enough satisfaction that if someone was, late on the deadline, then he didn't get angry and get known at the office as the yeller, the guy who yells, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why? Because he generated some satisfaction.
And I think what you're touching on is the whole, like, everyone's got their own purpose or passion, and you need to be able to tap into that to feel, like you said, whether it's feeling recharged or finding joy, right? At the end of the day, you touched on it, like, we have a lot of stresses in life, whether it's family, work, kids, but you need to be able to somehow separate yourself at times where you're taking care of yourself, and you can define what that looks like. But we all need that. And like you said, it could be nature, it could be working on your car, whatever it is, take that time. And then, like, I think manhood itself, you touched on it a little bit, but that definition has evolved too, throughout time, everyone's had a different role. Like, men had different roles 100 years ago, and today the roles have been redefined or evolved because we're a different society. So we need to be able to be aware of that and help each other out and support each other, where every man feels like they know what their role is and they're able to aspire to that. I think the issue becomes where there's a lot of confusion, and people, or even men specifically, don't know what role they're supposed to play. And I feel like that's where a lot of the issues come up. I don't know if that was kind of the thought process behind what inspired you to write this book as well.
That's definitely in there. I think you hit it very clearly and simply, and guys don't know what to do, and that is frustrating. So, and it's common. And where's the textbook on that? And there isn't one. And so, that is very much part of my book, to generate. Again, the title is How a Man Elevates His Skills and Qualities to Generate What He Wants. And so it's implied that it comes from the inside out. And in my case, I'm responsible for it.
Yes.
And what's my raw materials? Well, my skills and my qualities, right? Skills, communication, qualities of perseverance or patience or endearment. So, I think very much to reiterate what you're saying, it is we don't know what to do, and therefore who wants to look like an idiot? No one. And what's the question to ask? How do you, if you're at a company barbecue and say, hey bud, how's it going? I really am kind of lost as a man. That is not a great conversation starter. No. It's a bit difficult to get into. And again, that's where these guys on Instagram, there's like one is the Canvas Within. He's a guy out of Hamilton, Ontario, that he's got some pointed posts of a bit challenging, which are great, of a guy having to answer the question of what do I want and how do I want to be, and that can help generate inside the guy. Well, this is the guy I want to be, and then he makes himself open to be in contact with him. So these guys are doing great work. There's some, just have to look on it on Instagram, man's mission, all that kind of theme. So I think that there's some great work. That there are people who are in the same shoes as the rest of us, and we do have to get over that initial threshold of I might look stupid, and they I find that they just say no question is a stupid question. We all feel vulnerable. It's a constant theme, and that's so smart, because to just come out and say, geez, I don't know what to do. I don't know what my wife wants. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I got time on my hands, and I just, I love my family. I love, I got my job, and I'm coaching, or I'm volunteering, or I have my church group, or whatever it is, but there's something missing. Right.
Yeah.
And that's where I like to encourage people to look for whatever it is, their personal religion, their devotional life. And I don't point anyone to a formal religion or away from a formal religion. What I want them to do is have a lot of personal leverage whenever they are looking for to embellish their devotional life. So certain things, I call it self-elevation, right? So
Yeah.
I'm responsible. So I can, whatever energy I wake up with the day, I can point that towards what's possible or what's impossible, or make it possible or make it impossible, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah.
I think it's really, that's what it comes down to is, I think you've touched on it a couple of times, is ultimately we're responsible for defining who we want to be, right? And we need to do that work. And a lot of it also, like, I like the work I try to do is help men identify whatever it was in childhood that they're dealing with. Because that, that narrative or that theme keeps coming up quite a bit. And that applies to everyone, not men only, but for men, I think it's specifically around vulnerability, because and I've touched on this many times too, is, as a child or as a boy, you were told not to cry. You were told to be strong. You were told to not show your emotions, and maybe you weren't specifically told, but that was kind of the role models that were around you. And, you see it back then all around, like whether it was media, sports, anything, you didn't really see men show themselves in that vulnerable state. And I think, as I talked about earlier, as we've evolved in society, we need to be able to embrace some of those changes and feel comfortable to ask for help. And there's nothing wrong with it, right? If you're struggling with something and there's another person who can actually help you, support you, or just listen to you, why wouldn't you take that opportunity? Or instead of like choosing to suffer, because ultimately that's what happens is, you suffer in silence, and it's a repetitive cycle, right? And I mean, it's being able to support each other, whether it's men's group, like you said, if you're organizing retreats, if you're just sitting in a circle of men, having these conversations and supporting each other. It could be whatever you want it to look like, but there's tons and tons of opportunities out there right now.
Yeah, and yours is one of them. And so I'm glad you're doing it. You're growing it, and you're creating a space where people can come in and from their life experience, from their work, they can say, hey, this is what's working for me, or this is what I want to do. And in my case, I want people to get in touch with me for whatever reason. Go through the Wild Coach blog, or check out my book is on Amazon, right? Here's Satisfaction by Kevin McNamara, and you can get an ebook if you want. And so that if that can be provocative, because the book is not really a story. It's just a lot of paragraphs that I use, like Wild Kirk is one. It's about connecting to nature. Kirk is the Old English word for church. And so very much that just little paragraphs of encouraging people to get out there and get a handle on where they are and what they want to do. And then we're so much more comfortable when we have a little idea of what we want, because then you go, hey, I'm doing this. What do you think? And you don't, not as lost, because I know every day is different. And some days I'm full steam ahead, and other days I'm like, what am I doing? And I know I'm not the only one. And that's where the concept of emotional agility
Mm-hmm.
comes in, and what that refers back to the self-elevation, I say, because emotional agility has the two axes, so the horizontal and the vertical. So the horizontal is daily life,
Mm-hmm.
and the vertical would be, again, this devotional life. So horizontal is daily emotion, and vertical is devotion emotion. And one thing that I think, uh, I grew up Catholic, and I don't really recall, I don't go to church now.
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to. I'm finding other avenues of personal growth, and loving it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this idea of um, we are responsible for our growth, and there is energy available for it. And that's that devotion emotion. And it's very, very powerful. And I think, if, from what I've seen, if we don't get education about it, then instead of using it to grow, to go vertical, and to strive for the new you, then that same energy still arrives, and it's because it's so powerful, it can perhaps overwhelm us. And in the moment, if we're frustrated, I think that can potentially be some of the energy behind violence,
Mm-hmm.
because religion is so powerful. When someone believes something, how they go, I believe in this person, this God, this this soccer team. It's phenomenal what we
Yeah.
the power of belief. And this is in the territory of devotion emotion, and we need to educate ourselves, or get educated by the elders of our society, of
Mm-hmm.
this exists. It's valid, it's relevant to you as a man to develop your devotional life. And it can be sitting down with your coffee in the morning, with your tea in the morning. It can be perhaps after everyone's gone to bed, and you just can you take a shower, and just 5-10 minutes of meditation. It can be taking the shoes off and walking in the backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this balancing or process of being able to live the demands of daily life, and still being able to be responsible for your devotional life. And and it's not easy. And like I
Yeah.
say, I don't think there's the steps. There's a lot of great religious text, religious books out there. Excuse me. And it's how to integrate it into life,
Mm-hmm.
that we can go up, live in the devotion emotion for 5 minutes, or for if we're at our religious temple and we're at a ceremony or service, can be there for an hour or two in that, and then come back out of there having elevated with the perception of the religious connection of the
Yeah.
religious leaders, and put it back into life. And I think we're challenged in that these days. And I know that the Catholic Church, the participation has gone way down, and it's nothing personal per se. It's just that they don't have it. They've lost their mojo. If you ask me, they're not. The religious connection, the religious service that they're providing to their clients, basically, is not very good. And
Mm.
whoever, I mean, if if I'm paying for a service and it's not very good, I'm going to look for another service provider. And I think that religious leadership, or devotion, direction provided, again, my experience with the Catholic Church is it's not there. And again, listening to Curtis Blind and on one of your podcasts, look at the results. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're busy being a religious leader, if you're on a mission, you are not running a residential school.
Yeah.
That is where I think it's a sign for us to do some of the hard work, ask some questions of to self elevate, and to
Yeah.
really have developed that devotional life.
And I think the whole devotional energy concept is interesting, and to your point, it could be religion for some people, but I think ultimately the goal is to find stillness within yourself, and taking that time to reflect, and
Right.
focusing on um, like focus looking at the world, like obviously, you know, like there's an energy that's greater than all of us, right?
Yeah.
Whether you believe it or not, but as a form of God or whatever you want to look at it as, but there is something greater than us. And ultimately our purpose here in this world is to feed into that, right? Like do something to make
Yes.
this world a better place. And
Yes.
you know, it could be the path of religion, or you could just in your heart tell yourself that you want to give back and serve. And
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of men or even women, but once you find that passion to serve and that purpose, I think that's where you really get that life satisfaction and you're content. Otherwise, you're constantly chasing. And some
Yep.
people have addiction problems, gambling problems, or and there could be violence. But ultimately, the goal is to have that purpose of serving.
Yep.
And anytime I've done things where you know I'm doing them like in a selfless way, absolutely no selfish gain, which is hard nowadays because we've got so many distractions and so many like things going on around us. But when
Yep.
you're able to take that time to do something selfless, that is when you walk away with the most satisfaction. And you haven't gained anything material. It's just that you're feeding into that positive energy. You know, you're not walking away with money, you're not walking away with a car or a new home. You're just doing something that may pay you back in different forms, but it's nothing material.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you, listening to what you're saying, I mean, these are things that are service and purpose are things that I touch on in the book, definitely. And it boils down to what you want, generating what a man wants. And so you're, they're flowing out of you naturally. And so I think there's a universal need to be of service for exactly that reason. We get to feel that we are important, that we belong, and that our authentic manner of synthesizing the power of the day with our skills and qualities to be of service to whoever it is, our wife, our children, our community, our colleagues, the planet. You know, that is so rewarding. I think you touched on it exactly, and that takes me to this being in service to our spouse. Talks about this female friction that's in the book, where I use this so we can have a little bit of relief. Female friction and the male version of this would be the male stack. Now, these are some different terms. Basically, they're referring to our emotional management, emotional processing, where it's different in people and quite different many times between a man and a woman. And that's where I use the analogy of shift work, where I have my laptop here in front of me, and if I press the number 1 on my screen, I see the number 1. And if I press shift and that same button, I don't get a 1. Mm-hmm. I get an exclamation mark. And then so if you cover the shift button, you don't see the person pressing the shift button when they press the number 1 again. You go, what just happened? You press the same button and got a completely different result. That is crazy, right? And that is, I think, can be a man's experience not understanding women. It's like, it's so straightforward, the guy thinks, right? It's like, and that's the idea. The male stack is like, we are one thing to the next to the next. It's obvious, it's logical, it's linear. And for women, it's neither better nor worse. It just can be quite different on the inside, and that is why they arrive from starting in the same starting point, arrive to a completely different destination in a matter of seconds about the same topic, right? With the husband they've been married to for 10, 20 years. And so this female friction is lateral in terms of understanding them. Sort of with a graphic, the male stack is one thing on top of the next, and for the woman it's very lateral, very fluid, where they can have a nature of taking into account the pressures of being a mother, being a wife, and being a professional, their maternal life, their their romantic life, their professional life, and for it gets mixed up. And what it the key word is friction, where it causes a bit of a friction in a woman, where the man doing the same process, it doesn't cause a friction for him to arrive at the destination, whether it be a decision, right, or just looking at next steps or what to say. And so that's something that I think is I repeat in the book a number of times. And from my experience, like in my marriage and talking with my daughters and looking at my parents and looking at the world, my research has shown me that this is something that is really important to understand, that we have these lives inside us, men and women have them. There's the professional life we all have. There's the parenting life, right? The maternal or the paternal. And then there's the spouse life, right? Where we can romantic, even if you don't have a spouse, a partner at the time, you still have this life in you. And they're always in looking for expression. And some people, right, they're really good at certain ones. Like some people just have, remember my buddy from university saying, yeah, my wife and I don't argue. It's like, what do you mean you don't argue? We've never argued. And it's like, wow. And it's like, really, that's their spousal life. That's their romantic life. And for me, that's not the case. And then there's the professional life and there's the paternal life. And for me, they pretty much all cause stress. They all have their challenges. They all have the rewards. But me dealing with them, I'm talking with my wife, I can see her and I'm waiting for her to speak, because inside it's this lateral back and forth. And it's not anything against a man. There's nothing wrong with a woman. It's that we are wired somewhat differently. And I would, if I could talk with any man, because my wife, he says, my wife doesn't think like I do, or doesn't understand me, or I don't understand my wife, or we're having communication problems. I'd say that makes perfect sense, because I think we are lacking a bit of understanding about ourselves. We have differences that make us neither better or worse. But when you're talking about anything with your wife, she's dealing with a conflict in her that is not personal. It's not that she's not bringing anything to the table that is putting it on top of, like, that's not trying to complicate things, right? It's because what happens is with this conflict is a competition for the other lives to be included, and that gives an incredible peripheral vision. And in my book, I quote a lot of or refer a lot of books that are really helpful to understand ourselves. Like Iron John is one of them, by Robert Bly, and also there's one, How Women Decide, and it's just really useful to understand. It's really talking about women executives. And so Therese Houston is the author, and How Women Decide, it just is really useful for a man to be able to understand their experience, and that when it can, how it's useful to use a woman's mindset, and how it's useful to use a man's mindset. Of a woman can perhaps be slower to decide because there's more peripheral activity. And so in a business setting, it can be like, oh, that person doesn't have confidence to lead. And, I don't, in that case of that person, maybe they don't, but what's actually happening is there's this process of a conflict between these lives that is taking perhaps more into consideration. And so it can be, it's all in every single life. So in the professional life, which this book was talking about, it's talking about bringing up the children, and it's talking about dealing with her husband. And so if a man can, I think it would be great for a man and a woman to be able to talk about this, where they'd say, hey, honey, I heard about this thing, that female friction. And it's like, where in you, there's a conflict where that makes you go a bit more peripheral or circuitous in your decision-making thinking. And for me, it's straight ahead. It's logical. And it's like, hey, does that make sense to you? and that way, because then it gives you a page, right? When we can say we're on the same page. And so that's something that I would love to share, and love to talk to people like men and women, couples, and say, if this can help you in your life and pass it on to your children, I think it'd be a great gift.
Yeah, and I think it's all about mindset. I mean, you can look at these differences and not label them as a weakness in either gender role, right?
Exactly.
Whether it's the feminine or the masculine. I think it's embracing those differences and leveraging your strengths. And, I think relationships I've been in, I value the different perspective or the different way of thinking the other person brings. And sometimes it can be frustrating because it's not exactly your way of thinking, but it doesn't make it wrong, right? And like you said, some people are more linear in their thinking, men or women, and others try to incorporate a lot more information. There's nothing wrong with either. I think together, if you work and you leverage the strengths that each person brings, you can ultimately do a lot of great things. And that's why even in business environments, corporations are starting to see the value of diversity and having like diverse teams, because everyone brings a certain strength that you can leverage. But yeah, and I think as men specifically, we need to be comfortable in that. I think it shows courage and confidence where you're able to embrace other people's strengths too, and not get into that mindset that it makes you appear weaker if someone else is leading or you're using someone else's rationale. There's nothing wrong there. I think it actually shows more confidence where you're comfortable enough to let other people identify your blind spots. And ultimately, that's what it boils down to. We all have our blind spots.
Yeah, well said. Courage and confidence. And I think a man who has courage and confidence probably has it can impact their amount of patience, so that in a difficult moment, they can be frustrated and just say, okay, let's stop a minute and not have our argument elevate into a fight, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say, I have no idea what's happening, but I don't want to make anyone wrong. I think that's so key to have the courage and the confidence. And that's where, when for middle age, it's this sort of open area where challenges are not sometimes right up against us. When you have the challenge right in front of you, then you know what you need to do, right? But when in middle age, where, okay, you've been married for so many years and your children are getting older and in school more independent, and your job you've been doing for a number of years, where's the upfront challenge? And that's the energy is there. We receive the energy to deal with the challenge. And I think that's really the responsibility of elders, and I would say in the certain religion, in my case, the Catholic religion, to identify the path forward, or I instigate in someone, in myself, reflection, questions, to be able to get some traction with a religious life. And I just don't see that happening. There's one guy I worked with, and he's a fabulous guy. We've done a few of the nature-based experiences with him, and he holds on to things, and he needs, and he's doing a great job. He wants to grow. He loves to help people, and he knows that he's got to get past what he's holding on to. And so forgiveness is a word that seems to apply. And I think with in his case, it's this idea of growing, because he's busy forgiving. And if we can sort of just breathe and just kind of let the forgiving happen, because we're too busy reaching for the growth, right? And so I call it the 3-for-1. 3-for-1 means forgive, foretake, and foretell. So forgive is you want to forgive. Foretake is take responsibility for your words, actions, energy, and direction. And foretell is saying, this is what I want. This is where I'm going. And really, you the more you focus on the foretell, on where you're going, then the forgiving will kind of that can dissipate and disintegrate what you needed to forgive, or the need to forgive, because you're just too busy. And the self elevation you're creating in yourself takes you above the anger and the bitterness of holding on to things in the past and the hurt. And so again, it's these are little tools that the 3 for 1 and that and the female friction. These are little tools that I like to use with guys, so they can do it, like, know they're responsible and ask for help, right? And
Yes.
so it's that sort of dance where I'm not alone, but I'm not a child. I really have to say, this is what I want. And if after an hour or a year, it's like what I want changes or hopefully refines, awesome. So we're not stuck to, this is what I want, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, you're right. Like, I think that's what evolution's all about, right? Like, the information you had today is not going to be relevant tomorrow, potentially, and you may learn new facts, you make mistakes, you get new lessons, and that's what life is. You learn along the way, and you kind of pivot at every point, and there's nothing wrong with changing your course. In fact, that's the best way to do it. Is the more information you have, the better vision you have, then you tailor your approach accordingly.
Yeah, well, that's just a funny thing from this morning. I was cleaning up, around the home, and I know my wife likes to have the house relatively clean, right? And so I'm doing a bit of that, and it just wasn't the time. And so, okay, I'll stop, right? And I mean, I had to, some guys can tell, and this time I couldn't tell. Maybe I should have picked it up, but she said, not now, because she was doing something else. And so I want her to be happy. And so I want the house to be clean, but she doesn't want it clean now. So me to do the process of cleaning now. So that's the what's more important, that it's my expression of what I think, or to achieve it, it's her happipiness. I'm getting satisfaction out of making her, or being participant in her happiness. But hey, if her happiness is not to clean in this moment, then that's fine, because that still makes her happy as well. And gives me, shows me that I can be responsive and agile, right? Agile, not fragile. That's my, because she could say, I don't want to clean right now. Oh, I have a big problem. It's that you're always saying I never clean, or X or Y or Z, right? And it's like, it's agile, not fragile.
That's I appreciate that distinction, because that's so important, because quite often we take it personally, and we're like, well, what do you mean? Like, I'm trying to help you, right? And then that's where things fall off the rails. So Kevin, I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing some of this wisdom and knowledge when it comes to, as men, how we can really accept our roles and work towards really embracing who we need to be. And everyone's journey is different. Everyone has a different destination, but I think ultimately our goal is to really know our role, and that role changes. For some people, it's parenthood. Some people, like you said, it's being a spouse. For others, it's being a son or a child. So at any point in our lives, the role shifts, and we need to be nimble and adaptive along the way. So I do appreciate you sharing all of that, and some of the stuff you've already included in your book. I guess for listeners that want to get a hold of you, I know you talked about your blog, but what are other ways of getting hold of you online or through social media?
Sure. Yeah. Definitely. If folks on Instagram want to get a hold of me, Kevin McNamara. So it's Kevin _McNamara CA, right? So it's all together. And there's also my website, kevinmcnamara.ca as well. And check out on Amazon the book Satisfaction by Kevin McNamara, and you can see that, or just download the ebook. And I'd definitely welcome folks to reach out, and guys who have their own groups on the go and doing different events. I'd be happy to work with them. If there's a guy out there who wants to talk a bit more like that, talking about the female friction, it was kind of an express version explanation. So if someone wants to open that up a bit, definitely just get in touch. And yeah, I think fair. Thanks a lot for having me, because I think you're doing some great work here. It's you speak really clearly in terms of what you're doing to be a resource for men to be able to pioneer into the new you of them, right? I think you're doing a great job. So thanks a lot for having me.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. And, again, super grateful for you to come on here and do this. So, yeah, thank you again. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. As always, please subscribe to the podcast if you enjoy the episodes, or leave a comment in the comment section. I always love hearing from you. Thank you again. And until next week.